have 3 bills to discuss today, 2 of them potentially for passage prior to our full committee voting session this afternoon. One of them is for discussion only and the potential development of additional amendments. So let's start with HB 1479 and SB 885, and we can discuss them together. And these bills are intended to create within TEDCO a Maryland Equity Investment Fund. Essentially, my understanding is this money was set aside a few years ago from the pension repayment, but there have been some issues with implementation of that. So this bill is intended to allow for the implementation of the original intent of the legislature's action from a couple of years ago. The Senate did amend 885 before they sent it over. They amended it to define what a qualified business is, and they amended it to strike some language on the 4th page about the direction of the Board of Trustees for the state retirement and pension system. George, did I miss anything in the brief description?
No, sir, you have that correct. Just was going to note that the term that they brought in, qualified business, does conform to other TEDCO investments in statute. And as you noted earlier, there was a clarifying amendment on page 4 to remove the direction from the Board of Trustees from the investments that is not necessary for that portion of the bill.
Okay. And I see Troy has joined us. Oh, just joined us. Okay, Delegate Plakovich-Carr, go right ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just had a question on one very specific provision in the bill, and it sets a cap of that the companies that could be invested in have no more than 250 employees. And the part that I'm trying to piece out, and I see Mr. Sobel has joined us, and I apologize for our abbreviated phone call right before this, but I'll ask my question here. Are there existing criteria for other TEDCO investment funds that are based off of an employee cap? Is this comparable, I guess, to what TEDCO is currently doing? I'm trying to piece together how this fits into the bigger picture.
Right. So I appreciate the question. I know. Thanks for allowing me to come and chat as well on this. So to directly answer your question, no, there is no cap. That we just I've been swapping emails since this came up with our lawyer. So there is no there's no he said there's no legal parameters. That said, as you and I quickly discussed, but as many of you are aware, the whole point of TEDCO is to invest in those smaller stage, early stage companies that don't have traditional access to early stage capital. I think the point that I want to make sure that the committee is aware of, though, is, and some of you heard me talk about this notion of stickiness. And as these companies get bigger, and like a 250, and by the way, right now in our portfolio, I just checked, we don't have any company anywhere near 250 employees in our current portfolio. And we have almost 200 companies in our portfolio right now. None of them are near 250. As they get to those larger levels, though, remember this fund is going to be there for a long period of time. And if they come to us and have an opportunity to get follow-on financing in what's called an A or B or even a C round, and they have gotten to that level, and they need us to fill a hole in that financing, I'd want to have at least the ability to have that conversation. It's not going to happen on a daily basis. I can promise it's probably going to happen on a once a year basis that issue will come up. But I want to make sure that we'd have as many tools as we can to keep these companies in Maryland, because as they get in bigger, we are seeing many of them leaving Maryland to seek opportunities outside the state because we don't have those tools to keep them here. And this would be a tool to keep them here.
Thank you for that historical data. And it's actually really helpful to know that the companies right now are smaller. I guess the reason I'm flagging this issue today is since most net job growth is happening from younger companies, from smaller companies. And this might be at a bigger question of, is the purpose here to be generating revenue for the state? Is it to be keeping or growing companies in Maryland? Is it to create jobs here? And I have a feeling it's all of the above. But I feel like since so much of the work that we do in this committee is focused on job growth, personally, I'm a little uncomfortable with the 250 cap, something smaller that's going to keep it more targeted to earlier stage companies. We actually will see, on the whole, more benefits in terms of job creation in Maryland.
Yeah, not even trying to get argumentative, so please don't take this as because it's not, because I understand your point. I think that there's both that happens at the early stage where that growth is happening, but there's also the question of what happens as they get bigger. And we are seeing in certain sectors as they get bigger, where they're getting these financing rounds, some of them are starting to leave the state. And so we'll do all this work at the beginning only to lose them on the tail end. And I think that's the other thing we do have to consider here.
Thank you.
Delegate Barnes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's good to see you, Mr. Stovall. To piggyback off of Delegate Palakovich Carr, out of the 200 businesses that you have under you, what is the largest size company that you have, and what is the employees of that company?
No, I figured that was a question. I've not scanned it completely, but I did a quick look, Delegate Barnes, and the largest number that I saw was a little under 100.
Right. So I guess to her point, with 250 employees, at what point do you think that we would ever hit that number? And should that number be smaller to be able to really utilize the benefit of what we're trying to establish?
Yeah. So again, I don't give it right now. I'm not seeing that in the portfolio right now. So let me say that right now. But as you've heard me talk a lot about, part of this is about scaling these companies even more aggressively and more rapidly. And so what I don't want to honestly create is an arbitrary cap that then, that to your point, we're not using it right now. I don't see us using it, but I don't want to be boxed into that if at some point we actually do that opportunity, and that gives us an opportunity to keep that company in Maryland, and they're looking at our investment versus something that might take them, pick another state that they're going to go to. And we are seeing some of that happen.
No, and I'm with you every step of the way. I'm just somewhat concerned as well of that 250 number cap, right? Because if the largest company you have in your portfolio now, you have 200 businesses, and the largest may only have 100 companies. I'm just trying to think, will we ever get to a point where we're hitting 250, right? And then if so, what is that time frame may even look like? Is that a year from now or 5 years from now, or will we ever benefit from what we're trying to get established with this bill?
Well, here's what I'll to answer your question. It could happen sooner than later because it's not just this money. I have to look at the total portfolio that we have here at TEDCO. So it's this potential 10 million that this bill envisions bringing to TEDCO. But don't forget, we've got about $50 million that is coming to us through SSBCI. And all of our monies, Delegate Barnes, can be stacked. In other words, someone could get money from Builder Fund and from the seed funds and from this fund. And so stacking those funds is a huge story that we like to tell here at TEDCO. And it's an important part of the toolkit that we have here at TEDCO. And so my point is, we could be looking at some significant financing given this $50 million that we're getting. We just got a notification that there's some issues happening in Washington about SSBCI funding, but assuming that doesn't happen, that this 50 million is going to come to us. Plus this was all of a sudden this ability to scale these companies could change. And so I'm giving you my historical numbers, not knowing what this scale is going to do going forward.
Okay, thank you.
Just to point out also, the language, the qualified business language that includes the reference to 250 employees is identical to definitional language already in the code related to TEDCO in, what is this, 10401?
401.
Yeah. So this is not, it's language that reflects existing language. Delegate Feldmark.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I have a question, just shifting direction a little bit. As Delegate Palakovich Carr said, this is a bill with a lot of different goals and purposes. But one of them is obviously as a pension investment. So I'm just curious how this compares to, so the investment earnings are split, if I understand this correctly, and please jump in if I'm wrong, 50% goes back into the pension system and 50% is retained by TEDCO for other purposes, right?
Correct.
How does that compare to other sort of investment management fees that we pay, for other investments where we're looking at earnings for the pension system.
Yeah, so I can't speak to pension because I don't know. I can't speak to pension. I can only speak to what we've had here at TEDCO. If you know, most of our funds are evergreen funds. Like Maryland Venture Fund is evergreen, so you funded that, and we keep 100% of that. And if I may, this speaks. Remember the spirit of this bill, which again I got to thank the Senator Griffith and Senator Elfreth and the Delegate Learman for this. This is an outgrowth of a number of conversations we've had with them and the committee, with the challenge we had with the initial funding that went to pension that was to come to us. And if I may, very quickly, it really created you created diametric issues, because pension at the end of the day is supposed to generate its highest level of returns at a minimal level of risk. That's almost converse of what TEDCO is for. You set up TEDCO to take on risk and get the best return given that high level of risk. And so you're asking pension to invest in an instrument that's just counter to what they do. And so this bill is an attempt to still leverage the money to give pension some benefit, whatever that is, to 50%. And so, obviously we agree with it. And so it's really to still allow pension to get some benefit from investing, if you will, in Maryland without having to take on that risk. I hope that answered your question, Delegate.
Thank you. No, that is helpful. And I think that sort of, juxtaposing the two, methodologies, right, is important. And that's really what this bill is, I think, bridging. I don't know, George, do you have any comparative information on just about that sort of earnings split?
Do not have information regarding the earnings split. However, I would note that as highlighted in the fiscal note, although money was set aside through the supplemental contribution via the statute to be paid to the state as part of the pension contribution for investment in private equity and venture capital, the authority to use this additional funding expires after fiscal 22, and it's generally not been used. And so, as indicated earlier, my understanding is that this is to effectively fulfill that initial intent.
Right.
As far as general investment fees, it's my understanding that the retirement and pension system does negotiate competitive fees, but I do not know exact parameters for that.
Okay, thank you.
Delegate Palakovich-Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you for pointing out earlier that 250 point cap is already in statute. I guess, given that, one last question for Mr. Stovall. Would you say that should this bill passes, is TEDCO planning on investing this money similarly to what you've been doing currently, looking first at early stage companies?
Not even a debate. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, I'll drop it then.
This just gives us more capacity to find and invest and grow those early stage technology companies, period.
Perfect. Thank you.
Any further questions or discussion? All right, then I will move the amendments to conform HB 1479 to the Senate bill.
Second.
Any discussion on the amendments? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, I move the bill as amended.
Second.
Any discussion on the bill as amended? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, HB 1479 is recommended favorably. Senate Bill 885. George, we don't have any additional amendments on it, right? We're just moving.
There are no additional amendments for 1479, and there are no amendments for its cross file, Senate Bill 885.
So I move Senate Bill 885.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so those two bills are recommended favorably. Thank you, Mr. Stovall. Appreciate you stopping by.
Thank you all. Appreciate your service.
So moving on to our last bill for discussion only, Senate Bill 391. I wanted to give us a chance to discuss. The bill had been sitting, and I know there have been extensive concerns about the More Jobs for Marylanders program, particularly its unpredictable and extensive fiscal impact on the state budget, which the fiscal note makes clear is approaching $1 billion within the next decade. I got a call from the secretary yesterday who asked if we would at least talk over potential amendments to it. The bill as introduced would extend More Jobs for Marylanders, I believe, for 5 years and make some changes, minor changes to the program. There are also 4 amendments that I asked George to work up for us to potentially consider. Those would, number 1, reduce the annual fiscal outlay from the current $10 million to $5 million. Number 2, reduce the amount of time that a company could qualify in a Tier 2 jurisdiction from 10 years to 5 years. Tier 1 jurisdictions would continue to be eligible for 10 years under at least this set of amendments. Number 3, to reduce the reauthorization from 5 years to 2 years. And number 4, I believe, George, did we develop the language to clarify that money can't be carried over from year to year?
Yes, sir. So I was going to say in the reprint, the change regarding the Tier 2 entities that are newly certified on or after June 1st, that's on page 5. The 2-year rather than 5-year extension is on page 6 of your reprint. The alteration to the income tax credit cap is on page 8 of your reprint, and then in line 15 of the reprint on that same page, we strike the authorization for the use of funds carried forward for issuing initial tax credit certificates for future fiscal years. And then on page 9, we add in the sales and use tax component to provide the reduction Delegate Lukey spoke to a moment ago, which is shown on page 10 of the PDF.
So we can take all or any set of these amendments. We can consider additional amendments. I wanted to use the time we have today to see if there's discussion, thoughts, concerns about the program, about the amendments, to see what's out there. Delegate Buckle was first.
So just to summarize, I guess I tried to jot these down. The yearly appropriated tax credit value of the program would go from 10 million to 5 million. Now, it's actually, my recollection is there's actually maybe more than that, because you're still getting the benefits from the prior year, from people that are in the program. But you're saying yearly for new credits, for new companies coming in, they can only award 5 million instead of 10. Am I following that right? Okay. That one, I don't love it, but I understand what you're trying to do. The second one I like, if I'm understanding it correct. So if you're in a Tier 2 county, who's really, was not the focus of the legislation in its original conception, the benefit period that company can get the variety of credits available would reduce from 10 years to 5 years, right?
That's correct. And actually, that's one of the things that DLS had pointed out in their reports, was that essentially too much of the money is going to Tier 2 counties, right, not enough to Tier 1.
Right. I mean, I agree with that. And then the third one is that the program would be reauthorized under the original bill. It's 5 years. You reduce it to 2. What's the significance of that? I mean, is it just to give us more ability to keep looking at it over and over again? If we're already reducing the fiscal amount, we're taking a big chunk out.
Yeah, I mean, personally, one of my challenges with this program is that we don't have good data on its effectiveness. And part of the reason for that is it's so new. It's really only been in effect for 3 years. So 2 more years gives us, a full 5 years to look back, figure out, is this working or not?
Is that, and I mean, maybe that's a question we can't answer. Maybe someone from the department or someone eventually, as we move through this, do they think that that's enough to really keep there's no sense having a tax credit program if businesses don't want to subscribe to it, because, if they're like, hey, it's only 2 more years, it doesn't give us enough time to sort of keep the supply chain going of entities coming into the program. But that's just a concern. And then what was the 4th amendment? I missed that one. You said you had 4. What was the last one?
I'll turn to George to let him explain.
Okay.
Currently, any funds that remain or that haven't been allocated within a fiscal year for a pool of applicants in the manner that the Department of Commerce has interpreted the tax general fund, tax credit fund to operate. My understanding is that the Commerce has interpreted that provision to allow them to issue up to $9 million in income tax credits for each new successive class of applicants or participants in the More Jobs program. When they don't allocate the maximum in a given year, the statute currently allows rollover of the funds to be issued for future tax credit certificates. Once again, this is something that's similar to other tax credit programs, but here appears to be being interpreted differently by the implementing agency. And so this would strike that authority, because we believe that it has become increasingly confusing to tell what the potential rolling amount of credits that may be authorized by the agency are any given year. And so to the degree that costs have become increasingly difficult to predict with respect to this program, we believe that change would help to address that issue.
So in sort of just a layman's view of it, they had $9 million in income tax credits to award in year A. Under the amendments that Delegate Lukey is discussing, that would be cut to $4.5 million, I think. I think you're cutting the program, that portion of the program, in half.
Mm-hmm.
So they'd have $4.5 million. If they only gave $4 million in credits, they awarded $4 million in credits that year, that's it. So the extra $500,000 in credits no longer goes to the next calendar year of award.
Correct.
Where does it, I mean, it doesn't go anywhere.
It would remain,
It's not real money.
in the fund and would simply be used for purposes of paying off the final tax credit certificates that are issued under the program.
From prior year applicants.
Prior or current. Mm-hmm.
So you can't stack up and say, oh, well, we didn't have much new subscription this year, so we're just going to stack most of this year's money to next year's money too. You can't do that anymore. You got to get them all in that one year. And if you don't, then it's just there to pay off prior participant years.
Correct.
Okay. I mean, whether it matters or not, I really like Amendment 2. I think Amendment 4 makes some sense. And then 1 and 3 are kind of, I don't know if they're open to negotiation, but I mean, I think maybe we could split the baby a little bit with some of those things. That's it. Thank you.
None of these have been voted on. We won't vote on them today. This is just discussion. When we do vote on them, we'll vote them individually, so folks have a chance to discuss them individually. Delegate Polakovich-Carr, and then I'll go to Mr. Whitaker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. George, a couple more technical questions. So the $4.5 million cap that's in the amendment, that's for the income tax credits. Do I have that right? Is there any cap on the property tax credit portion of the program in the amendments?
No, there are no alterations to the property tax credits under the bill.
Okay. And then continuing from something that Delegate Buckle just raised. So companies qualify for, is it 10 years of benefits under the program?
That is correct.
So that $4.5 million cap, 9 million currently, is just for the new companies coming in. The actual total cost on the program is significantly higher because it's whatever the prior 9 years.
That is correct, because of the stacking effect and how the Department of Commerce has interpreted the statutes thus far.
Okay. And then also, I was trying to look back. I feel like this was one of the credits that DLS evaluated in recent years. Is that right?
That is correct.
By recollection, I couldn't find the report, sorry, before we got onto subcommittee, but I feel like this was one of the programs that DLS had recommended termination of, otherwise major reforms of. Do you happen to remember any of the details of that evaluation?
If you give me one moment, I'll bring up our most recent report. But yes, that is correct. we generally found that there was significant overlap between this program and several other programs. And so we were suggesting that the Department of Commerce evaluate and consider consolidating the One Maryland Enterprise Zone, More Jobs for Marylanders, Businesses Create New Jobs, and Opportunity Zone Enhancement programs. Department of Commerce disagreed with that suggestion. We also recommended changes to the statute to reduce program cost, including reducing the income tax credit's actual value and the number of years that the credit may be claimed for future applicants. We also recommended eliminating the requirement that the governor include in the annual budget and appropriation equal to the minimum level of that Commerce reports is necessary to promote or support manufacturing opportunities on business activity. We recommended eliminating current reporting requirements, instead require the department to report annually certain information regarding the program's fiscal impact. We wanted clarification about the income tax credits, how they count towards the authorization limits, because once again, I think that there's some confusion as to how between the statute and implementation. We suggested reducing complexity by eliminating distinctions between Tier 1 and Tier 2 designations, to eliminate the sales and use tax refund because it's underutilized. Let's say to get rid of the property tax credit and the waiver of the corporate filing fees that are available to new businesses. And I'll provide a link to all the members to the report in its entirety.
Thank you for that.
Mr. Whitaker?
First, I'd just like to say thank you, Delegate, for developing these amendments and working with us on this bill. Would it be possible to share a copy with me and I can share it with our Commerce colleagues and we can provide any feedback as soon as possible?
Yeah, we'll get that over to you right. I'll have Brad email you when the meeting ends.
I appreciate it. Secondly, some of our folks in Commerce have some additional suggestions on how we might be able to make this bill work, including reducing the benefit period for Tier 2s to 5 years. So if okay with you, I'd like to turn it over to Jen and she can kind of explain it a little bit further.
So that made it into one of the amendments that we just described, that suggestion. If there are other suggestions, Jen or Mr. Whitaker, feel free.
Great, thank you. Jen, if okay.
Yeah, I think that suggestion to reduce the benefit period for the Tier 2s is one that we are definitely happy to work with the committee on. And if there are any further possible changes that the committee would like to consider, we're happy to be part of those conversations. But that was kind of our first recommendation for a way to control the costs a little bit. But then we've heard the concerns that more of the benefits are going into the Tier 2s and the Tier 1s. So this would reduce costs and also still provide a little bit more of a sweetener for companies to locate and expand in Tier 1s versus the Tier 2s.
Jen, can I ask you a question? So is there currently any cap on the number of employees a business can have to qualify for this?
No, there's not.
Okay. In general, the companies that have been awarded, do you have a sense of what size they are?
I'll ask Lonnie if she can, I know she's got the data 10 ways from Sunday, but if she's got kind of a quick estimate of what the average company size is or the average new employees added.
Well, and if she doesn't know off the top of her head, she's welcome to.
Yeah, we can provide that after, certainly.
Okay. Delegate Feldmark.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it will come as a surprise to no one on this subcommittee that I might be interested in looking at the definition of what is a qualified position, and making sure that we are supporting good quality jobs with this public subsidy. I also am not sure how well such an amendment would fare, but along those lines, George, can you remind me? I know some of these programs had not great data as we were trying to look into the the current information on the qualified positions and just getting more of that data. Can you remind me if More Jobs for Marylanders had that information available, or if we're not able to establish more rigorous standards here, could we at least get better reporting of that data is something I'd like to look at.
I'll review our report quickly to see whether that was spoke to that.
Okay. So just to let folks know, I think that's something I'd be interested in looking at if this is something that's moving forward.
Okay. Other questions or discussion right now? Okay. So my plan for this would be, I was planning for us to have another subcommittee meeting on Thursday. So that would give folks 2 days basically to dig into it, look at potential amendments. If you have an amendment that you'd like us to consider on this bill, please get it to George. And then we, on Thursday, will go through all the amendments we have and talk through them. Given the DLS report, I might also draft some additional amendments myself on it. And then when you send them to George, if you could, just as a courtesy, also share them with the folks at Commerce so they get a chance to look at them and provide feedback. That would be very helpful as well. Any final thoughts before we conclude subcommittee? All right. Thank you all very much.